All right. Well, hello, everyone. We're starting up here on our Thursday, and we have a special guest with us today, is Natalie Para. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell her story a little bit. But the reason she's here is that I have gotten the question a lot. Hey, what can I do with my 2-year degree? I know that part of it is, well, it can transfer on to the 4 year. If you're taking a transfer degree, but what do you do in the meantime? And so I thought, hey, I know this one gal, right? A former student of mine's, Natalie, and Natalie has agreed to share her story with us on the things that she has done with her 2-year degree and what she's doing now. So, Natalie?
All right. Well, my name is Natalie Para. So I graduated with Ivy Tech in July 2020. And so my degree was in human services. I chose that field because of my personal experience, and it has done me really, really well. When I graduated from Ivy Tech, with due to COVID, it was a bit strenuous trying to find a job. However, I did, I went through Daryl Decker, who helps you with resumes and helps you with forming your resume so that way it looks clean. Because a lot of times, students like myself struggles with forming a resume and what to put, because you don't want to put too much on there. You want your resume to look very clean in one page. You don't want it to be like 3 pages because employers are not going to really, look at all that stuff. Um, so I went to Daryl Decker, who helped me clean my resume out. And then I started just applying through Indeed. I also looked through Ivy Tech, where when you graduate, you're an alumni, and there's a website where you can look for jobs based on your position or similar to that. So my first job, actually, after graduating from Ivy Tech, was I was a paraprofessional at Richmond Community School, because I enjoyed working with kids and just to get the dynamic of working in a school system. However, that wasn't really my field because my major was in human services and not teaching. I'm not saying, don't do it, but it did give me a little bit of experience of working with children that were in special education classes. So then after that, I found this position at Head Start for a family advocate. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to apply for this job because it talked about how they want someone with an associate's degree in human services field. And I was like, perfect, So I applied there. I even started calling them the next day and saying, hey, my name is Natalie Parra. I applied to this position. So then they called me in for an interview, and the position was for a part-time, which was even amazing because I was going to school or starting to go to school at Ball State. And so I wanted a part-time position. So what I'm right now doing is I am a family advocate at Head Start while going to school, getting my bachelor's degree in social work, which I will graduate next year with my BSW. So I'm very, very excited about that. The great thing about the family advocate is it does give you that field experience to the degree that you earn. So my description as a family advocate is I work with children and family. We do home visits. However, with COVID, we basically, and call the parents, letting them know that, hey, because of COVID, we can't really do home visits. However, let's set an appointment to where we could do a phone call, like a conference, just to see, where you're at, where's the child at academically. Basically, we try to get students from the age of 4 that are going to go to kindergarten next year ready for that. So preparing the kids going to that. We also work with Meridian too to help us determine the kids, if there's any special needs that the kid has, get that child into that program. We also provide different resources for family that are in very low income. So we provide energy assistance, who to go to. We are partner with a lady, I forget her name, but she does the application for energy assistance program. We call her. We also do, we have different programs for those who don't have insurance and who to go to, depending on the community, the county that you reside in. We also provide applications for child care assistance and who to go to for that based on the county that you're in. So I really enjoy that. And I mean, I do like working with the family and children a lot. And it really does go towards my major that, I graduated from. So, I mean, it is possible. Um, I would, just continue searching after once you get your 2-year degree. I know a lot of jobs want a 4-year degree, but if you look for a job and my thing is like I told him, I was like, hey, I don't have a 4-year degree. I do have a 2-year degree and I've done my internships here at these places. You know, if you do that, if you show that you are really into it, most companies will hire you. And also my best thing is, reach out to them. I always like to, whenever I apply for the position, my thing is I do my research, as far as like what is their mission. Because if that mission does not fit with you and your job, I would not waste my time. So definitely, find out what their mission is, what benefits you get from them, all that stuff. So, yeah.
All right, Natalie, thank you very much. I think one thing that I really like that I just want to highlight that you said was that you said that some places they'll say they want the bachelor's degree or
Hmm.
this, that, or the other. And remember, they will ask for the unicorn, but if you're just a regular horse, you may be a darn good regular horse in their eyes. Probably a terrible example, but um, the fact is, you never know until you try. You never know unless you ask. And just like Natalie said, she went to him and said, "Hey, I don't have the bachelor's degree, but here's what I did do. Here are my internship experiences, which are huge." And he had some unique internship experiences uh, that I think really did prepare you for going into the field and look great on a resume. So internships are important. So let me ask you a couple of questions regarding that because we're going to be having the big internship talk with a lot of these people in a couple months. So
Okay.
the as far as internships, like could you tell us a little bit about them, like where you did them, and maybe some advice that you would give somebody when they're putting that together?
So my internship was through Ivy Cares. So I did my internship at Ivy Cares because one, it really worked well in my school schedule, and that's something that you also need to take in consideration is you want an internship that is going to be somewhat flexible for you and your school schedule as well, so you're not failing your classes. So I really like Ivy Cares because we work with Ivy Tech students, and I enjoy that a lot. So then I would say my other internship that I did was through Centerstone, and because of COVID, everything was all virtual. Um, with Centerstone, I had more experience with Centerstone because we did work with different communities. From Wayne County, we did Rudolph. Is it Rudolph? Am I saying that right?
Randolph. Randolph.
Randolph. Sorry, Randolph.
It's
See,
the
I'm
snow.
so new to this area. Okay.
Yeah, it's the snow. You're
Randolph.
cool.
And just hearing other people from different communities and what they do is so beneficial because it does give me like a huge eye opener as far as who to go to if I need this type of assistance. With Centerstone, I really like Centerstone just because of the experience that I had with them. And working, I mean, there was one of the things that I liked with Centerstone was I was able to do a Zoom meeting with one of the therapists, and she was actually working in a group session. And one of the things that I learned with Ivy Tech and Humans 101 was the difference between open and closed group. An open group is basically anyone can come into that group. There's no date of when it's done. It's just anyone can come in. And with the closed group, you are here from, it's like a commitment almost. So the closed group is, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 12 weeks, and they have a certain day and a certain time. And I really like closed group a lot because you do get to meet the same people. The people that are in that group, they can collaborate with each other because they're all going through that same thing, depending on what it is. It could be addiction, it could be mental health, it's whatever. So the closed group that I was in was basically women that have gone through sexual abuse, women that were prostitutes. There is a woman who is now graduating with her bachelor's degree in social work, but she was a victim of sex trafficking. Um, Sorry, my phone. Sorry. And just hearing her story was such a huge thing. I mean, a lot of times people have this tendency that because you've done this, oh, well, you won't be successful. You're not going to be a nobody.
Mhm.
And to me, that's one of the reasons why I chose human services, was because when you're in that program, you have to have hope. You have to believe that there's hope, there's chances, there is change. People can change. It's just that you have to, that person has to put in the effort into it. Um, and so just seeing and hearing people's story from how they went from point A to point B is such a huge honor, just to because they're putting their self out there, and so it's a huge thing. And so having that experience during my internship and hearing that story really did touch my heart, and I was like, wow, this is why I love human services, because there are people like her that have a story that they can share and tell, and yet she is doing a phenomenal job, and here she is going through all these changes and all these dynamics, and yet she is not giving up on herself. And that's the thing about, if you're going to do human services, that is something that you gotta one, you gotta believe in hope, because we're all human, we make mistakes. And the great thing about making mistakes is you learn from them. I've made several mistakes, and I learned from that, and because of that, it made me be the person I am, the mom I am, and the woman I am. So it's okay to make mistakes, and we all learn from those mistakes. But you got to have a change of heart, and you got to believe that there are people out there that you know can change. So that's why I chose human services. So.
Yeah, and you are right. Without believing in hope and the possibility of change, it is too easy to become jaded or burned out.
Mhm.
Uh, those sorts of things. So even having some a degree of self-awareness and having some some self-health checks where you're checking yourself along the way and saying, okay, I know, you know I started this with a ton of compassion and really believing in hope. Why am I down with this right now? And being able to gauge those things in yourself is really really important. And
Mhm.
so cultivating that sense of people really do have value, there really is hope, there really can be change.
Mhm.
Those are things that uh, will drive you forward and make it to where Monday will roll around and you'll be like, okay, yeah, we can do this. It's just Monday. It's just the Monday blog.
Mhm.
It's not, and you won't
And
things snowball.
one of the great thing about Ivy Tech, well, in Richmond, because that's the school I went to, so
Yeah.
um, is that there are advisors that will help you, even if, like, let's just say you decide, you want to switch majors. I was one of those students that I switched majors like crazy because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. You have support from them. You have, advisors and staffs that will help you, in making those decisions. And you have staffs that will help you get out to the community. So if you want to do nursing, you got, an advisor in nursing that will help you with your internships and where to do your internships. If you're going to do human services, you have advisors that can, get you there as far as where you want to do your internships, including professors there too. I mean, that's why they're there, to help you. But you have to make that move, so I mean, I love the staff there. I love Jeff was my advisor. And trust me, I would always go to his office and be like, knock, knock, and just, Jeff can tell you when I went into Ivy Tech, I was on academic probation.
Yeah, I
I
think
am
that's
not.
something people people will get hung up on that stuff, won't they?
Yes.
And what academic probation and SAP, all of those other things
Oh yeah.
really, what all of that truly means, you have to take a step back and realize what all of that truly means is, hey, life happens.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's ways around, over, and through, but you have to go to someone. You have to reach out. You have to start that self advocacy, and start that process of moving forward. And you did that, and like so many other people, it was really scary at first, but then like once you made that first step, everything
Mhm.
was cool.
Yeah,
And
I think as a student, when I was a student at Ivy Tech and I was on that academic probation, it would, for me, it was like embarrassing because I was like, oh my gosh, like,
mhm,
Natalie, you cannot be doing this. But really, at that time, I went from criminal justice major, then to teaching major, to finally saying, I'm doing human services. And that was because, talking to Jeff about like my personal stuff, he was like, I think you should do human services. And I was like, well, what is that? And so he explained that to me. And then I had other staffs there that even said like I should join human services. So I wanted more more information on that. And because of I chose that field, like first of all, my GPA went up. And then, second, I enjoyed, that field, that program, because you're out there, you are hearing other people's story, so you are the change. If you're in human services, you are that change that's going to touch other people's lives. And that is what I love, because for so long I had this thing about fixing people, and I had that passion, so I chose that field. So just know that if you're going to do human services, just know that you are the change for them and you are the change for the community. So you have to get yourself out there. And even if you stumble, just get back up. So
mm.
I mean, yeah, it's a definitely rewarding field. It has its pros and cons, but it's definitely rewarding.
Okay, so one last question. Kind of turn back the clock in your mind. Okay,
Okay.
you're in HUMS 103. You're getting ready for your internship stuff, um, and or maybe even you completed your first one or something. But uh, I guess the question is, do you have any advice for, internship advice for someone that's getting ready to go into that, and maybe not so much even picking, you know where they want to go, because many people just get hung up on those things, and it's like that is like way down the line. There's other things, that have to be done before then. But what would be some advice that you would give somebody, if you could, like, turn back the clock and say, I'm in HUMS 103, I wish I would have known this, or I'm glad that I did know that, I'm glad that I did do that.
Okay. So my advice for those doing internships.
Yeah, getting ready to go into internships.
Okay. Well, first of all, the professors will give you, a list of internships of where you can, possibly do your intern. I would do my research on depending on where you want to do your internship, I would do my research on those, on the, what is it? Like for instance, if you're going to do your internship, at, Richmond, what is that? Richmond, oh dear, the state hospital. Sorry, the
Yeah.
state hospital. I would do my research on that. What is their mission? What are their goals? What are their values? If that speaks to you, I would contact the director there. So that is something I don't want, my advice for students that are doing their internships is don't do it because it is something that you have to do and is part of your grade. Obviously, you have to do your internship, but like choose a field where you feel like this speaks to me, you know? And what I did as a student is I picked three things that were like my top three things that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to look into it. Then I'm going to look into the second one, and I'm going to look into my top three things. And I did my research on it. And, the first one that I chose, I think it was the state hospital. But when I called, the problem was it was just the schedule, and because of my situation, it was really hard. So that's why I'm saying, like, choose your top 3 places that you want to do your internship, look into it, and then see which one speaks to you, and and also, how is this going to help you, especially, when you're in school full time. You want to make sure that that they're flexible with you. A lot of internships will be flexible with students, so don't stress out too much about it, because most of it, they will be flexible because they know that you are a student. So,
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that's really important. And then of course, the all important, you know, don't go to meet your site supervisor. Don't go to interview there at the internship site in like yoga pants and a Led Zeppelin t-shirt.
yes,
You know,
no. You want to,
professionalism. Yeah.
professional. Yeah. Think of it as if you're going, as if it's your job, you know? So that's what I was gonna, yeah, that's a good point. Don't go in there with yoga pants, don't go in there with flip flops, be presentable, and take it as if this is your job. Because really, I mean, you want to give yourself a good impression, but you also want to give your school a good impression too.
Yeah, and the thing is, this is how you build. This is how you build references. It's how
Hmm.
you start networking. It's how your name gets out there. And who knows? It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's happened many times before, where an internship site will say, "Hey, we like this person. They've hung around. We think they're
Hmm.
cool. Let's offer them a job." I mean, it's happened before, so you do want to look at it like it is a job. It is a job. When you're having the conversations with them and communication through email, I mean, no text speech, those, you
Hmm.
know, you know what to do here. You need to be professional, and the rewards down the line. I think like with Natalie, I believe you went on into work study and some things like that
Hmm.
around here.
Yeah.
So there's a number of opportunities that can pop up, and that come from you putting your best foot forward, and really showing, hey, this is what I can do. Um,
Mhm.
and and you are right. The staff here. I mean, people will help you out if you have questions, and I don't know the answers. I'm going to point you to someone that does. So it's something that, just remember to speak up and speak out, and there will be, and you'll get some of the answers to some of the questions that you have.
Mhm.
Well, Natalie, do you have anything else for us? I have just one last little question for you.
Okay. What's
Okay,
your
just
one question?
one question that you can answer just real quick.
Okay.
What is one thing you discovered about yourself in this entire journey?
Oh
To
my
put it in
Lord.
one sentence.
One thing that I discovered about myself. Um, I don't put excuses in my life.
Okay.
That's a good one.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think after everything that has happened, I continue to, move forward and continue to strive for the best. Um, and I'm not saying everyone's like me. We all have our ups and downs, but I think, just with what I went through, I just, I told myself I can either sit and mope and, not feel motivated because, things, life happens, we can't control what happens. But you have two choices in life. Either you get up and you continue to reach for your goals, or you can sit there and continue to just, be upset and not, feel unmotivated. And I know there are people that are like that, but you gotta do you. And I think that's one of the things that I did for myself was, I told myself I am not giving up. I worked so hard for this, I'm not giving up. So.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Yes, and the reason I asked that is because there has been a big change with you. You've seen it. Everyone else has seen it. Since the first day you walked in my office. Um, there's been just a lot has happened, and there's been a lot of growth. And so that's one thing I just wanted to impress upon everybody is that it's a journey. You're going to discover some things about yourself. I think, and if you're really open to it, I think you'll surprise yourself in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
Just
Hmm.
like just like Natalie, who would, if we'd have said that on that very first day when you walked in that you'd be able to roll with the punches on, to do like a virtual internship, that you'd be able to do this, that you'd be fired up about human services, that you'd be in a bachelor program, if we'd have said all that on the first day, I don't think you would have believed it.
No.
Not at that point.
No, I would look at you crazy. I'd be like,
right. And then now it's like, now to hear you talk, it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing, period.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really wonderful journey, and there's a lot of stories out there like this, and the whole reason for this is I could shoot you a list of jobs that you could go for and stuff if you get your associate's degree, but I think actually putting a face with and someone actually telling their story and what they've gone through, I think that's actually much more valuable.
Helps the person identify.
Yeah. So it helps that way. So I want to thank you so much, Natalie.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me over. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will talk to you later, and everything will be working out later on with all the other opportunities coming your way.
All right. Sounds good. Good luck, Amy.
Thank you.
Bye, Jeff. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
There we go. All right. So I hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all enjoyed Natalie, and we're able to take away a few things there. She has a wonderful story, and I think it serves as a real inspiration. And maybe will inspire you to, kind of start checking a few more things out in populations that you might be interested in, and everything else. But I do want to get on to talking a little bit about mental health. Mental health. When we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about mental illness as our chapter's discussing, serious mental illness is any mental, behavioral, or emotional condition that seriously impairs life. So that's kind of our working definition as we move forward. And what a good place to start is by looking back and seeing where we've been, the history of it. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I put this in here. I'm so glad you're here, Amy, because I was like, if nobody's here, this is going to be off. It's going to be awkward. But there's a lot of things that have come up with COVID and the pandemic. So before I get to that, I have put some discussion questions up here. I don't know how many of you maybe have talked to some people in the mental health community, who are working in human services, but there's a whole lot of buzz going back and forth in the mental health community, also the addictions treatment community, where they're, how has COVID and the pandemic and quarantine, lockdown, how has all of this affected our work now? That's a big topic of conversation, and not only some of the changes that are happening, but it's like, okay, what will these changes look like in the future? So first of all is to back up and say, hey, what mental health issues do you think have arisen due to this pandemic?
More depression.
More depression. Ding, 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 ding. You were right. Depression has increased. Can you think of anything else that has increased or popped up?
Social isolation.
Social isolation. Yeah, and with that, we hit with addiction too, because as I know, as we say all the time in our group, in groups when we're talking, is that isolation is addiction's greatest ally, but healing happens in community. Mm-hmm. And so when you break down that community and means of community, well, problems abound. So let me ask, what age groups do you think are the most affected? In what ways?
I think the senior citizens are affected pretty. A lot of them, prefer to go to church, and they don't know if they can actually get out and actually mingle in their church atmosphere. Mm-hmm. If they're in the nursing home, they don't get their family visitations because they're not allowed to have close contact. So they're isolated more.
Yeah, I think one of the big things here with looking at mental health and the effect of COVID pandemic and all this, one of the big things is that you really almost have to look at each different age group or demographic separately. It's, I mean, you can just say, okay, it's bad and there's more depression and stuff like that, but it really comes to light once you start looking at different age groups. So you're right. With the elderly, well, they might have been in a nursing home before, but they could receive visitors. So now you have people that have declined in health and have gone a year without seeing family. And of course, it's taking a toll on them mentally. Another age group which has really suffered a lot, I think a lot more than what people have thought they would be many teenagers.
I'll say adolescents. They're
Adolescents.
All the sports are being canceled.
Yes.
Social functions.
Yes, high school has now taken on a totally new picture, totally new meaning. And another factor there is I think that a lot of people thought that, okay, they might lose the extracurricular activities, but they're going to be okay because, kids on Facebook or not Facebook, they're, but they're on their phones all the time, social media, those sorts of things. I said my daughter,
they'll bounce back. I mean,
yeah, if I told my daughter,
having
hey,
teenagers, they're doing all right, but yes, they are affected.
Yeah,
they get bored easier.
If I mentioned my daughter being on Facebook, she'd launch into a tirade about how old I am. But anyway, the thing is, I think a lot of people thought that going in, that they would not, because I think a lot of people thought teens are already living in a virtual world, so it won't affect them as much.
That is true.
And instead, what we found, or what we're finding, is depression, anxiety, all sorts of issues are just exploding in that population. I mean, it seems that definitely more teens than ever are being affected and showing signs of depression, anxiety, and all of this because of all this. And I think that says something. It's part of a deeper discussion of like who we are as human beings. In that, what does human community look like, and what's the best human community? And I think it says something about the value of face-to-face contact, being in the presence of other people. Many of the teens don't have that, and even if they do, they're separated by masks, 6 feet, all that other fun stuff. So there's a lot that goes into that, and then on top of that, you have the just the sense of fear that's kind of pervasive, and it kind of builds. And so I think this age group is just kind of like basically soaked a lot of this stuff in like a sponge, a lot of the bad vibes like a sponge around them. And I think that we're only just now seeing some of the effects, and it remains to be seen what long-term effects may be out there. Which then brings us to, well, how do you help? How do you treat? And here's the conversations on the mental health care side. What new difficulties do you think mental health care professionals face with COVID? I know we say, well, they got to learn Zoom, but beyond that, what are some new difficulties that you
may not be able to quite communicate as well because of the face masks, the barrier that's between them now?
That's correct. Imagine trying to communicate to a developmentally delayed individual over Zoom, particularly if that person does not have someone to help facilitate some of the technology, or even if they understand the technology, being able to communicate with them on the level that they were before.
Right.
So success in communication is affected. And then again, one thing that some people have not learned is that not everyone has internet.
Yes.
And not everyone has unlimited data. And even if you do, it doesn't work on the scale that would be needed for like these constant Zooms. But then again, even then, now what we're starting to find is, I mean, the whole phrase zoomed out. We're starting to find that it really does get to you after a while. And I don't want everyone here to zoom out, so I'm going to go on. But I know that if you're watching this as a recording, you can always speed up, so you're okay, and you can skip ahead. So let me continue on. In looking back, some of the history of treatment, there's been a number of things that have been done. Your book does mention a few things. There will be a question or two on the test regarding this, not only the types of treatment, but what did they attribute mental health issues to in the past. So please do take a look at that in your book. But some of the things that happened in the past, I've listed here, from bloodletting to trephination. I mean, that's fun to say, right? That's like the drilling the holes in the skull. Awkward, right? But yeah, that's a whole nother thing in and of itself. Then you get in the early part of the 20th century, there were some things like drug-induced seizures. I believe some of that was in the 30s. The lobotomy, of course, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Who could forget that? Maybe Jack Nicholson in that. And also, of course, lots and lots and lots and lots of electricity. This one right here, if you read into the history of PTSD and particularly veterans, World War I, this was a popular thing, and World War I caused a number of issues because the death and destruction was on a scale that was not really witnessed by humanity before that time. And so there were many soldiers who had issues with PTSD, and so there were many methods that were tried, and a very popular one was the use of electricity. Hey, they may have some mental health issues, or maybe zoning out or whatever, but hey, if we shock them enough, they should come right around. Not sure the logic in that, but it was one that was very popular. There were several others that, if you look into the history of that, it's quite sad. It's quite sad. And the numbers of soldiers affected, we're not talking like a couple thousand. We're not even talking like 10, 20,000. We're talking in this, I believe, for Great Britain alone, was 80,000 who went through some things like this when they came back. That's not including the ones who just dealt with it on their own. So the numbers here are absolutely enormous. Now, so here's a question. Why do you think that people treated those suffering from mental illness in this manner?
They looked down on them.
Yeah, I think that's.
Didn't think they were worthy.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. You have people that can be, I guess, quote unquote, preyed upon. They people that are at a disadvantage. And I think in some ways it kind of reflects, a darker part of human nature. There's an experiment that happened. You can look this up. It's a terribly interesting experiment, terribly sad. It's the Stanford Prison Experiment. It was a social psychological study. It took place at the Stanford University in August of 1971. And they put out an ad. They got a whole bunch of students because, hey, college students, let's do this, right? And everybody comes in and they're all happy and they're like, yeah, let's do this social experiment. So the social experiment was prisoners and guards. They took the students and divided them up, and they took a small section of them and they were to be guards, and they took another section of them and they were to be prisoners. So they had their basically their freedoms stripped away. They were going to be confined, and they were going to do this over a period of time, several weeks. They put the student prisoners in a simulated prison environment. And this was actually funded by the government, the Office of Naval Research, because they wanted to see what would happen over time, and it would inform some some studies on into prison behavior and things of that nature. But what happened over time actually was rather surprising. What happened was that you would think that these people who all went to school together, that there would be some cooperation, that you'd have the guards that would, I mean, they'd play their role, but they would be rather nice, and they would think there'd be some politeness and things like that. What they found in the course, I believe it was over 2 weeks, they had the guards turned to very dehumanizing treatment of the student prisoners, enough to where they just stopped the experiment because it was getting bad. And I think one thing that it really says to us in this is that there is the potential for that dark side of human nature when there are people who are at a disadvantage, for one group to prey on or take advantage of, or just plain be mean to another. And so I think that kind of plays into the whole thing here. I do recommend that you look up that experiment. It's been referred to in many journals, and it's a popular one to look back upon. Now, there was some people, including Dorothea Dix, who had begun a long time ago, actually in the 1800s, exposing some of the abuse in the mental health care field. Now, in the 50s, but 100 years later, in 1950s, 1960s, then they're starting to talk about the brain and behavior connection, and that there's things that happen in the brain that will cause certain behavior. And so they start putting all of this together. And then around this time, there arises this. It's a thought behind moving to deinstitutionalization. Say that fast 3 times, won't you, Amy? I tell you. Yeah, I know. Deinstitutionalization and then a strengths-based approach. So if you are wondering on that exam guide, who is Saleeby and where is this in the book, you should probably check out page 184 and 185. So that's where this is pulled from. Saleeby was one of the researchers who started bringing this type of approach to the front, who really advocated for this, who said, hey, why don't we take a strength-based approach when working with people who are suffering from in the area of mental health. And so he came up with these 5 principles that were put forth, and they're listed there in your book. And it was to start looking at things as, there are resources available. There's members in it. They're members of a community, and as such, they're entitled to respect and dignity, not to be dehumanized in any manner. And these things were important. In some sense, it's like, it's sad that it took a researcher by 1960 something to actually say these things, but it's good that he starts bringing these things to the front. But then also says in this, remember that people are resilient and have the power to grow and heal. And so therefore this population and people who struggle with some of these issues, there is hope. There's also the need for relationship and community, and that people have a right to their own point of view regarding their problems, even if it's a point of view that you don't agree with. So this was rather revolutionary, and really started turning the page in some mental health treatment. As I said, that's 184 and 185 in your book, and I don't know, that may be a test question. So from that, later on, we get the DSM-5, which you can access in your Ivy Tech library. You can go there, and as you go online there, you would be able to access the Ivy Tech library, and one of the books that you can look up is the DSM-5, the latest edition of it. So that has disorders, conditions, and everything else under the sun. It's one of those books that's like really thick, and you have to have a backpack to like even carry it or think, it's one of those types of things. It has a number of things in there. Remember, as we mentioned before, yes, this lists everything from anxiety to schizophrenia, depression, and everything in between. This lists everything, but remember, this is for clinical diagnosis and some observation. And there are, what needs to be taken into account is, like, even though the DSM-5 will say, like, about depression, when people have symptoms of depression, withdrawing, the loss of appetite, maybe feelings of being overwhelmed, and et cetera, et cetera. People can have those symptoms, and the DSM-5 will say, well, if they've had them for 2 weeks or more, then that is a classification of clinically depressed, having a diagnosis. But keep in mind that we all go through seasons, and there are life circumstances that also happen. So I said before, if my dog gets hit on the road, I mean, yeah, I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to feel like that for a while. If my grandmother passes away, yes, I'm going to feel like that for a while. Now, I may feel like that for a good while, more than 2 weeks, a month, maybe 2. But that doesn't mean that I would be clinically depressed. What it would mean is that an event in life, has put me in a season of life where I exhibit those symptoms. And so, when you look at this and you start looking, because trust me, when you look at this, you'll start reading a few things and you'll be like, oh yeah, this kind of happens to me. And I mean, if that's your point of view as you're looking at it, you'll close the book on this thing and say, man, I've got like 47 conditions in here. The fact is,
become a hypochondriac.
Yes. I mean, the truth is that just keep in mind that there are seasons of life. This helps with clinical diagnosis, which is done at the clinical level. But this book can also help inform you when you're working with certain populations and in certain areas. So it's just a resource. Don't use it like WebMD or something like that. I guess that's what I should say. That's my big disclaimer. Enough said. This is actually very important. The biopsychosocial is mentioned for the first time in your chapter here. This biopsychosocial in HUMS 103 is like the big assignment. It's also called like a comprehensive assessment, psychosocial. Different places will call it different things, different agencies, but it draws information from the biological realm, psychological realm, and sociological realm. So basically, it draws information, health and physiology. It's looking at mental health information and also relationships that a person has to other people and the world around them. It will bring all this together, and it's like, I don't know, it's like a small novel, you're the amount of pages for this type of stuff. But from that information is where some of your initial assessment is. You place that alongside the presenting problem, and then later on, whether it's the caseworker, clinician, or whoever's writing the goals for the case, would be using this sort of information in order to write some goals and some plans later on. I just want you to be familiar with the term of biopsychosocial, because I'll be using it an awful lot in the second 8 weeks, and I need you to know what it means now. All right. Okay. So another thing that comes up in there that I do want you to be aware of is the difference between a clinical disorder and a personality disorder. Amy, can you tell me the difference between the two? Do you know?
Clinical disorder would be just a generalized like PTSD. And then personality disorder would be somebody changing the way they react from like every 5 minutes to like 1 minute they're extremely happy, and out of nowhere nothing's changed, and all of a sudden they are completely the opposite and angry at the world over nothing.
Okay, so this, yeah, you're describing like a couple of different things. And so I want to clarify it. I think you hit clinical or like right on the head. There's a really easy way to remember this. as you look at both of these is that the clinical disorder, think of it this way. A clinical disorder is when the client or patient knows that something is wrong with me. Okay, I know that I am suffering from depression. I know that I'm having extreme anxiety. I know that I've read the DSM-5 and now I think I have 47 conditions because I know that I'm a hypochondriac. That's just a silly example, but it's when the person knows, hey, there is something wrong with me. And the personality disorder is when the person believes there's something wrong with everyone else. There's not something wrong with me. It's you all. Okay. So, did you ever see the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson?
Probably. I'm not very good
Probably.
at
Okay.
remembering
So
stuff like that.
yeah, he's running around and, I think he had, and I think I've seen it, but I really remember the previews, he's got like the tinfoil hat and everything else, and spouting conspiracy theories all the time. And so that would be an example. And one thing that he was constantly saying is that it's them, it's everybody else. Something is wrong with everybody else. They have the problem. And that has kind of stuck with me as a good example, because that means the personality disorder says something is wrong with everyone else. It's not wrong with me. So I don't, and I think maybe I've seen like one episode of this, but there's a show called Hoarders. And at least the episode that I saw, when they went to confront the person, that person did not believe that there was anything wrong with like keeping every Kleenex they've ever had or used over the past 5 to 10 years. And they thought that was perfectly normal. And saying, some of the other cases where like there's a disorder where someone would actually keep their own feces and think that was normal, and then say, well, I mean, something's wrong with you all because you don't. So there is a difference between the two. The differentiation between the two is something that I would highlight in your book. It's probably something that could be referred to on the test, and just can keep straight in your head. The clinical is the one where the person says, okay, something is wrong with me, whether condition or whatever. The personality would say something is wrong with everyone else. So when it comes to mental health, the biggest thing about it is the stigma. On the average, I believe if you're looking at a person who's now receiving treatment or help for mental health issues, on the average, a person will go 8 to 11 years before actually receiving any help. And that is, that's a number we got to get down. So as human services professionals, it's going to be your job to stand up against stigma. I mean, stigma of all types. We talked about, stigma against, addiction, recovery, but also stigma against mental health treatment. The thing is, like we said before, like was even mentioned earlier in the earlier in this recording, is that I almost said earlier in the broadcast. Well, it's like thinking of Dan Rather or something. But like was said earlier, at the end of the day, life happens to all of us. And so we need to remember that. And that's part of what goes, that's part of the mindset behind standing up against the stigma, saying, hey, life happens to all of us. There's no shame in seeking help. Just like if you had diabetes, you'd go to a doctor. If you do have depression, if you are suffering from depression or anxiety or severe OCD or something like that, there is no shame in seeking help. we need to be able to communicate that to others and also model that in ourselves. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we had that green ribbon and the fight the stigma mantra there. There are some special considerations in this, some special considerations that I wanted to mention and that you can kind of take into consideration. Number one is self-care. If you're dealing with this population and say you have the heart to deal with someone who's someone who might be suffering from depression or anxiety. I don't know why I keep coming back to that example, but say you have the heart to deal with some people who are suffering from these sorts of things or some developmental delays. But say that, you know, if you're hanging out with an OCD person and you just find that draining because they have to stop and they have to count to 97, you know, 5 times a day, and you're like, oh my goodness, come on, can we get to our next stop? If that's you, even though you're attracted to working with a population, be self-aware enough to know that, okay, I'm okay working with these other populations, but if it's this one here that drains me, maybe I need to put this person at the end of my schedule in the day so that as I'm leaving, I'll be okay, because it'll be an easier transition to go home. Because if I do this in the morning, when this person has like drained me emotionally, then how can I give my best for these other people? And it's not really their fault. It's just, you know, like I said, maybe the OCD stopping and counting, or a good example is maybe you've watched the television series Monk, and where he would go by and he would touch everything, and maybe you're like, oh my goodness, why are you touching him? And maybe that would drain you. Maybe that would be like the one thing that gets on your nerves with that, and you can stand the rest. If that's the case, like I said, be self-aware enough. Hey, you can still work with the population. Just juggle your schedule around to where it's going to make sense to you, and that anything that is draining like that, put those at the end of the day. It's a simple move, but it'll help prevent some burnout over the long haul. Also, with military veterans, PTSD, in fact, PTSD with a lot of different areas, but particularly when someone's been, with veterans, when someone's been outside well, for lack of a better term, like for them, when they say, you know, returning to civilian life, they have been living one life here. And like I said, this could go for PTSD with, you know, someone who's been in survival mode in a number of different situations, maybe chronic abuse or something like that. But remember, with this person, is that it's not just that they're working through the trauma. They have been living in this one mode here, and basically they've been living in this one world, and they're reintroduced into this other world. So military, non-military. Maybe a household where someone was chronically abused. Maybe you have a woman who had been physically abused or emotionally abused for a long time, and then is coming out and basically coming into a new world where they're realizing, in the case of the woman who was abused, that hey, this abuse, that ain't normal. That ain't right. And so the survival mechanisms that were in place like all the time for everything,
they're still in place, even
they're
though
still
they're
in place.
needed.
They may or may not be the correct survival and coping mechanisms, or they may not be appropriate for operating within the society. And then the person like realizes this, like, okay, what I've done and how I think to act, it's not right. Something's not right here. And so what's happened is they're having a paradigm shift. They've gone from one point of view in one world, and now they're in another. So it's not just that they're dealing with the trauma, but they're dealing with the shift as well. And so remember that. That's something to keep in mind, particularly when working with this population when it comes to mental health. Also, prisoners, 60% have a diagnosable mental illness, but mental health care in prisons is notoriously it's notorious for actually not being very good. They are working on that. Also, there's come up. I believe this mentions it. This may mention it in the book, but there's been a huge question that's been asked lately, and that is, it deals with the Affordable Care Act. Healthcare is there, but should a person who is clearly suffering from a mental illness have the right to refuse treatment? Because we all have the right to refuse treatment, right? But if a person is mentally ill, not in their right frame of mind, they say they're suffering from delusions or something like that. Does that person have the right to refuse treatment? You know,
That's a good question.
yeah, because
Definitely makes you stop and think.
yeah, that's one that I'd love to, and maybe we'll have this conversation as a class, but do they have the right to refuse treatment? And maybe it would come down to a case by case scenario with what levels of cognition, because when you might be talking about someone who's suffering from developmental delay, but what levels of cognition would be required for a person
Right.
to use treatment?
And then if you go with that route, how do you label that?
Yes. And exactly, because right now, if if you are in a fender bender, but then still get jostled around and you've been KO'd and you wake back up and the ambulance is just getting there and you got a concussion and you're not all there, right? If they come up and they say, well, hey, you want to go to the hospital? And you say no, they're not going to take it to the hospital.
Right.
So you have the right to refuse treatment. Now, in that case, you've been KO'd, you have a concussion, you're not thinking, you're not in the right frame of mind, you're not thinking correctly. So not everything's connecting up there. So therefore, should you be able to make that decision? Should they be held responsible for letting you make that decision if after that you suffer greater injury?
Yeah, I actually have like a personal experience that made me go, huh, yeah, I can understand that conundrum pretty well.
Yeah. So there are a number of things here. Also remember, with the special considerations, there are some multicultural considerations, and I'll just give you a quick example and then I'll let you go, is that when it comes to human services professionals, there are a host of different multicultural considerations. I've tried to mention some different ones over time. So now I'm going to, in this week, I'm actually going to mention time. And that is that different cultures look at time different. On time is a completely different thing. And so when it comes to scheduling, you might have to get in a rhythm with somebody. For example, I remember when I was studying in the Middle East, and I was both myself and several other people were excited to be going to this like forum debate that was going to be happening on campus, and there were going to be several people from several different communities around that were going to be debating a very, very hot topic. And we were like, hey man, we got to go see this. And this takes place at 7 o'clock, right after dinner, right? Because the cafeteria opened up at 6. So we hurried up 8 and went around, walked through the gardens and stuff. We thought it was wonderful. And then we went to the lecture hall, which was dark. We show up at 7 o'clock. It's dark. We actually opened the doors. The lights aren't even turned on. Chairs are kind of like scattered around. Nothing's really set up. So, okay, what's going on? And we're thinking, oh, well, maybe someone got stopped at a checkpoint, or maybe one of the speakers couldn't be here, so they're kind of scrounging at the last moment. And we waited. 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by. People start leaving. I'm like, dude, I'm out of here. So I leave. I go back and I hang out in my room, and I eventually fall asleep. Next morning at breakfast, there's a whole bunch of people. Wow, did you hear what they said in that forum last night? That was incredible. And I was like, what forum? where did they meet? Because I was at the place that when they said, oh yeah, no, it was over there at the lecture hall. I was like, what are you talking about? There was nobody there. I said, oh yeah, they people started showing up about 8 o'clock or so. Said, but on the program it says 7 o'clock. I said, oh wait, you're American. Yeah. So yeah, you all go by like times and timetables. So like 7 o'clock to you means you start at 7. Here it doesn't. It means you could start at 7, but nobody's really going to be there. Really, nothing's going to get going till 8, but then people got to talk. So we're probably not really going to get started on anything till about 8:30. And I'm like, 90 minutes later? Are you kidding me, people? And I realized that suddenly I was in the minority in my way of thinking. And I realized that in the culture that I was in, the being on time, it's a little negotiable. It meant, and as far as they were concerned, the lecture started on time. To me, it started an hour and a half late. Mm-hmm. So those are some another multicultural consideration to check out. I know that may or may not be a thing, but if you have someone that's chronically late, maybe that might be a thing, and that might be something to address in some ways, but that could be a reason. Just throwing that out there because I myself had a huge paradigm shift and was shocked at the whole point of view thing that was going on. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions regarding the test or anything else.